Colleagues, the next item on the agenda is the added emergency item number 70 that we added to our agenda, which is CIP communication to the County Council. And I'm going to now introduce Mr. Murray to discuss.
Thank you, Dr. Chair. Yeah, colleagues, so this is in relation to the proposed county budget for the upcoming year. As you all will remember, back this fall in our CIP discussions and vote, as a board, we were able to come together and compromise around requesting equal funding for High Point, which is number 6 on our CIP recommendations list, in the new Northern Area School, which falls at number 7. We requested equal funding for both of those projects, recognizing the important need to build both and to move forward on both. That was something I was really proud that the board was able to work together on. In the county's proposed budget for this upcoming year, there's $7 of the $8 million requested for the new Northern Area High School, but there's $0 in the budget for High Point High School in the upcoming year budget for planning. Colleagues, you know that High Point is one of our most diverse, one of our most deserving and needy schools in our county. The school is 98% minority, about 83% economically disadvantaged. It's a Title I high school with a graduation rate that's far below that of the county. It's a school that has been perpetually passed over by our county for a variety of reasons. And so tonight, in the interest of compromise, in the interest of not adding to the county's budget, I would like to urge the board and make a motion that the board send a letter to the county council and county executive asking for an equal split of the $7 million allocated for the new Northern Area High School in next year's budget for planning to be split $3.5 million and $3.5 million for High Point and the Northern Area High School, which reflects and lines up with what we previously voted on in the fall. Thank you.
Is that a motion, Mr. Murray?
Yes, Dr. Chair.
Is there a second for discussion?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Murray, seconded by Ms. Queen. Is there a need for discussion? There's seeing no need for discussion. Ms. Boozer-Struther.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate the sentiment, but I do have some questions about, one, there are other CIP budget items that were cut. So as a board, it would seem we'd want to support all of the projects. And the other is that to split this doesn't seem to be very productive, that the funds to move the process would be split. And I am not sure that that would fully benefit either project. So I do think we do need to deliberate over that reality. So thank you.
Mr. Swan and then Ms. Williams. Mr. Swan.
Yeah, I mean, I like to second that. I mean, just looking at the number of things that were cut, I don't think we should limit it to one particular school. I wasn't here when this was put forward in the fall, but the recommendation from this board was put there for a reason. So I believe if we're going to send anything, we should be comprehensive and complete, and not cherry pick because there's need, you know, that's been shown in what was submitted, and so that would be my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, and then Ms. Quinn.
I just wanted to add that the planning work, there are going to be a lot of items that need to get done. If we were to split the funding at the end of the process, at the end of this calendar year, we would still have 2 projects undone versus having 1 project done. And so I don't know if it really logistically will be helping us in any kind of way to split the money and do half the work on both in the time frame allotted. But I also suggest that if we're asking for something, we ask for the entire CIP to be fully funded, not just selective.
Thank you, Ms. Queen, and then Ms. Shepherd.
Yes, I agree with you guys as far as asking for the fully amount, but I really want us to think about that. Think about High Point High School. I remember first coming on the board and us going to the school, and Mrs. Swan, unfortunately, wasn't there. And I remember going to the bathroom and washing my hands in a school that had rusty water, okay? So let's be realistic. That school needs to be a new school. Not only do a lot of our schools need to be a new school, as a board, our job, we were elected, and some of you guys were appointed, but you were elected and appointed to fight for what was needed. So we have to lobby it, and we have to go down to the county council, even in the middle of COVID, then we need to do that as board board members, okay? We need to stop saying what we cannot do. I understand the county council is trying to get what they can do, but we need to do what we need to do as elected and appointed board members and say, hey, we need this for our kids. We need to put our children first. We need this for our constituents. And we need to start reaching out to our constituents and say, hey, we need you guys to help also. But we got to start standing up and speaking out and letting them know that the tax dollars they get from the governor on is for our kids and for our school system.
Thank you, Ms. Queen. Ms. Shepherd, Mr. Burrows, and then Mr. Murray.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree that if we're going to ask for the funding, we want to have the full funding.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Mr. Burrows.
Good evening, colleagues. I remember this was a very sort of contentious issue when the board voted last year. And the initial motion that was passed was to eliminate the new Northern Area High School and to fully fund High Point. That passed first reader. After that first reader vote, several colleagues were very concerned about it. Several county council members were concerned about it. I know Dr. Thornton and I met with the county council member I believe Mr. Rose was there. And as a board, we decided to not pit one community over the other and instead come together with a compromise. And that compromise was that we would send them both to the county and request the same amount. And that's essentially what we did. We sent High Point as priority 6, and we requested $8 million, and High Point received zero money. The new Northern Area High School we sent as well with $8 million, and they received $7 million. And so what I believe Mr. Murray is saying is that this board was able to not pit one community against the other, but come to some sort of agreement. And in that same good faith, I would assume this letter would say, we want them both built. We ask that you would do what you could to advance both projects. And it just doesn't seem right to give $0 to High Point High School. And that's essentially what it is. And it was a very contentious moment for that board, but ultimately the board came out unified. And I hope we could do that again today. I do want to distinguish these two issues from other CIP issues. And to say that, I'm sorry. So when we look at the new International High School at Langley Park, and we requested $0 for it. And that is number 9 on the list, right? And so the county kind of gave us what we asked for. We didn't ask for anything. I mean, this is really a case where we have a school that is number 6 on our priority list that got 0, and a school that's number 7 on our priority list that got $7 million. And so I would like to say fully fund the whole thing. I know we all would. We want everything funded. I would love to see schools on my district on this list. And I know you would all too. But I think the concern here is a narrow one, and that this board came to an agreement, a compromise. And I hope that we would share that thinking with the council members about advancing both projects at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Mr. Murray.
What I heard out of the first round, several colleagues said, if we fund both projects, we're going to slow down both projects. I think it's true that both would move a bit slower with the funding. We would like unlimited funding. I also heard those same colleagues say they would like to move one project forward instead of the other. That is why we have the CIP list that we did discuss so hotly in the fall. The list is very clear. It's ranked for a reason. High Point is number 6 on that list. I could have came with a motion tonight that said I want to strip the Northern Area High School of the $7 million and put the $7 million to High Point as it's higher on the list. There's no debate about that. And so my motion truly is an effort to meet halfway, and if anything, concede ground in the fact that High Point is the prioritized school of the two on the list of priorities. And so if we were going to move one forward, I think it's pretty clear we would move the one forward that's higher on the list. And in the interest of that spirit of compromise and keeping the ball rolling on a school that, again, has been passed over for decades because of arguments such as this one, my motion is simply one that's trying to meet in the middle ground and allocate High Point equal share and that which they have earned based on their priority rating on the list that this board voted on in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Ms. Ahmad and then Ms. Boozer-Struther.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Mr. Burrows covered a lot of what I was seeing and feeling. I did want to mention one point to colleagues on the board that may be feeling some type of way about splitting the funding the split of the funding, and that is that there are projects that are higher on the list that were not fully funded, and the county still felt like, okay, let me list one. So there's we're talking about our top 10 priority list right now. And within the top 10, there's a project that's listed for as number 4 that we asked for $9.4 million. And what the county is giving us is $6 million. And so if you're worried about the split of funding, there are projects that are not receiving as much funding, but I'm sure that the $6 million going to that priority 4 school, I think that at least we're going to get somewhere with that, right? As opposed to with High Point, if we're not funding it at all, we're not going to get anywhere at all with that one. And it is such a high priority, I think, for so many of us on the board that we voted to compromise on this and build it in and bring it in. And so I just wanted to emphasize that there is, I think that we need to start moving somewhere with this. And just because even if it's not fully funded in the way that we want it, having some funding for it will, I think, help move this project forward and other priority projects on our list forward as well.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmad. Ms. Boozer-Struther and then Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Just a couple points that I wanted to make is around the communities served that, both of these schools serve the same student body, an overcrowded student body of Northwestern High School, High Point, that new school is the same community. So it's not a split community, it's the same students. The other thing is what I want to clarify is we are not changing our vote. We came together for that vote. We are still together. The council in the budget process at the council level has changed the funding. So we are sending a letter. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we aren't changing where we stand. The county budget cycle the recommendation has changed. So we are writing a letter, and that's why I say we stand with our request in full and not split it apart. Thank you.
Ms. Williams.
Thank you. I think Pam covered it. We want to stand for what we asked for. And I think that we asked for all of what we asked for, because if you look at all of the money that we're asking for is not the same money. Planning money is different from construction money. It's different from design money. So if we're going to ask for something, I think we're trying to accomplish something and at least show that we're moving something, because at the end of this period, at the end of the use of this 7,000, whether it's 3.5 million or 7 million to go to one school, at the end of that funding, the question is, where are we going to be? If we only fund one school, we will be at the same place with that other school if we only funded it halfway. So what I'm saying is that we need to ask for all of the money that we're requesting for the CIP, not just cherry pick a school that's on there, because Flowers High School and their HVAC system is getting $0. So I think that like Ms. Boozer-Struther said, let's go and stand with what we asked for and ask for the entire funding to be granted to us.
Okay, colleagues, where we are, I have Mr. Omalola. Let me just explain where we are. We have a motion on the floor introduced by Mr. Murray and seconded, which would have the board writing a letter asking for equal division of funding support for Northern area as well as High Point. There is no substitute on the floor, so that's what we, after Mr. Omalola speaks, that's what we would vote on unless there's a substitute to achieve what board members have expressed. Mr. Omalola.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Colleagues, I just wanted to give you some history about the student board members and their relationships with High Point High School. The last two student board members, Manya Page and Jawan Blocker, when they sat on the board, with Mr. Murray and Mr. Burrows, High Point has always been a contentious issue, and they've always wanted to rebuild High Point. And every time we've got close or around the issue of High Point, something has always come up that has stopped us from making progress on it. And I know that we would all want to see a fully funded budget for High Point, but this compromise that Mr. Murray is offering today is really to give the best of both worlds to both projects. We do know that sometimes building schools and creating the architecture for them is slow. We've seen that over and over again. And I know when I visited High Point and the students that I talked to, when we tell them that they're getting a new school, when we tell them that we're in the process of getting them a new school, it's something of joy to them. Because if you know anything about High Point students, they take a lot of pride in where they're from. And I think it's important to those students, and it's important to me that we do our best and that we realize that this is about politics. This is about students and about a community that has waited and has been overlooked decades and decades at times for a new school. So I will urge you to support Mr. Murray's motion to make sure that we can support High Point and its community.
And I'm going to call on Mr. Valentine and then Ms. Shepherd. Let me ask a question to Mr. Murray before I call on Mr. Valentine. This is not a substitute motion, because as chair, I don't normally make motions, but is it impossible to accomplish both the objective you have as well as what other board members are saying? That is, in the strongest of terms, the board would reiterate its request to the council to fund its CIP proposal, all of it. If the council decides, if for an event it does not do that, then the division that you recommended would be supported by the board. That's one can achieve both objectives, but I'll go to Mr. Valentine. You can chew on that, Mr. Murray. Mr. Valentine.
Thank you. And I appreciate my colleagues in their comments. And it seemed like we have a lot more in common than I think those who are watching would see, particularly the passion that Board Member Queen has towards really advocating to our county council and to our state representatives on the urgent need to fund our CIP. Everyone on this call is directly impacted by this. And we all have our own stories. You know, I have my own. And this has been something that we've been dealing with for a very, very long time. The amount of schools in our district that have come to disrepair are really a byproduct of when these schools were built in an era where we were really going to expanding public education in this country. My children go to a school that was built before my mother was even born. And so this year, my children had to share a school because another school down the road was literally condemned because it was under such disrepair. And so obviously this is very important. At the same time, I understand firsthand the overcrowding in the north. As you all know very publicly, my wife is a principal of the largest middle school in this county, and she has, 10, 20, I don't know how many temporaries in her parking lot because Greenbelt Middle School is busting at the seams, as are every other middle school in the northern part of our county. And so again, what we all agree on, I would say, is we need to ensure that the students in the northern part of the county have somewhere to go to school that is safe, and that is up to the standard of what any of us would want our children to go to school in. At the same time, I understand as a board member, as an at-large board member, I'm here to ensure that the entire district is represented. And so I'll be opposing this on the merits of the letter, but I will join with any board member who would want to really advocate to our county council and to our state legislators that we need to fully fund our CIP.
Ms. Shepherd, and then we can hopefully vote, colleagues. Ms. Shepherd.
Yeah, I think that you articulated the fact that there's an overcrowding issue in the north area. And I think that I just want to make sure that we understand that the other school that they're putting all the funding to is also going to be serving the community. As you know, people in Langley Park and the Delphi Road by New Hampshire and near DC, those are the people that come all the way to Beltsville to go to High Point in order for them to, access a high school. So High Point is dearing to my heart because I literally can walk down there. That's where my daughter graduated, and that's where my children will be going. And so I do, you know, personally, I want a new school. But I also understand that there's the overcrowding issue, and that there is, if we bring another school, at least I feel like, or I have hopes that that will help a little bit of the overcrowding issue that we have in the northern area. So I did want to point out that even though if that other schools get built, we're still going to be serving the same population of students that go to High Point. But I did wanted to make sure that I highlight that. And I will want that if we do write a letter, that we write something that we want all the schools that we have planned before for them to get built, not just pick one or the other one, because they all were important to us.
Thank you. And I see one more speaker, and then we can vote. Ms. Cleveland and Ms.
And I just want my colleagues to understand, I understand what all of you saying, but I just want you to think back to what's going on at Wise and Flowers. When we built that new school for this area, then everybody started sending their kids from Central, and they started overcrowding in schools. And so it's not about that it's going to serve the same people. What it's about is it's not going to be equal equity-wise, because what's going to happen is some kids going to have a new school with new gadgets and new everything, new whiteboards, and other kids are still going to be having old stuff. And it's not fair equality, and that has been done years to us. And when you think about the people who live in the community, like I have, because I'm born and raised here, forever paid my tax dollars, my kids deserve the best school in every part of this county. And what happened is my kids got stuck at Central while other kids got new schools. It is not fair that has happened to people, and we have to stop doing it and stop letting it happen to our kids like that when stuff like that happen. So that's what my fight is for, to make sure that High Point, the residents and the people in High Point get what they need and what they deserve to have. So it's very important.
And I'll call on Ms. Samet.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Colleagues, I think this is real Rahila talking. The way I see it, we submitted our request of what we wanted, exactly the way we wanted it, to the county. And the county took it and they said, we're not going to give you that in the form of this proposal. And so for me, the way that I'm thinking is that, can we present something that's amenable to us that may also be amenable to them, so we can reach some type of a middle ground? Because to me, the way that it stands, it doesn't seem like we're going to get what we want, because we already asked for it and we didn't, and it's not in the proposal. So I just wanted to put that out there as food for thought as y'all make your votes on this matter.
Mr. Swan.
Yeah, to that point. I mean, and I agree with you, Ms. Ahmed. I think though, to cherry pick one item over the other items that are on here that didn't get the funding, that we asked for, then maybe we should be looking at a letter to say, all right, if you're going to give us $46 million, this is how we would like to get it, versus looking at one particular item, because there may be very significant things in priority 3, priority 4. Again, I wasn't here when this happened, but priority 5 didn't have any money, to it, and that's higher, than priority 6 and priority 7. For whatever reason, this list was put together. And so either we're going to, in my opinion, stick to what the board at that time said that was what the priorities were, or are we saying we're going to create a new priority? And if we're going to create a new priority, then I think that's a much bigger conversation that doesn't, that I don't think we're going to be able to solve tonight to get in a letter to the county council. And so, I think we really should ask for it all, because we need it all.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Colleagues, the motion is on the floor unmodified, and that's what we are about to vote on, which is to send a letter to the council from the board requesting the equal division of the CIP funding for the northern area as well as High Point. That would be the letter. Ms. Tate, would you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Ms. Ahmed?
Aye.
Ms. Boozer Struther?
No.
Mr. Burrows?
Aye.
Mr. Montero?
No.
Mr. Murray?
Aye.
Ms. Queen?
Aye, that's going to vote.
Mrs. Shepherd?
No.
Mr. Swan,
No.
Mr. Thomas,
Aye.
Mr. Valentine,
No.
Mr. Wallace,
No.
Mrs. Williams,
No.
Dr. Thornton,
No.
5 yes and no, I'm sorry, 8 no's.
Thank you. Is there any substitute motion that anyone wants to make that would achieve some of the objectives that?
You can call on me, Dr. Thornton.
Yes.
I make a substitute motion that we send a letter to the county council requesting that they fully fund the required budget that we actually need so we can move forward. So Prince George's County Public Schools can succeed and our children can have the best schools that's possible.
Is there a second of the motion?
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion of that? Mr. Burrows, did I see your hand?
Yeah. I would just ask that, Ms. Queen, if you could include in your motion to explain the rationale around the agreement. I mean, the board, we were in a full month-long debate between a High Point and the new Northern Area High School issue. I would just like to provide them some context about why the board decided to do what we did in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. And Ms. King, we'll work with, well, let me see if this passes, first of all. Seeing no other discussion, those in favor of this, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it unanimously. Ms. King, let the record reflect that. Ms. King, you and I, working with Dr. Golson's staff, will draft the letter, including the comment that Mr. Burrows just made, and we'll share it with the board before we send it. But it's an action, Ms. King, that we need to get to work on right now. Thank you, colleagues, for that rich discussion. I would say this in response to this. This is why I've been so deeply troubled by some of the actions taking place at the state level that's preventing the movement regarding Build to Learn. Because the frustration that you're hearing from board members reflecting the frustration of the people regarding aging schools and the absence of adequate facilities for our children is a result of processes at that level where we do not have statewide financing of building schools for our children. Now, the legislature passed the Build to Learn law, and it's caught up now in the vetoing of, I don't want to get political here, but the frustration you're hearing from these 14 board members with limited power to influence anything that we're talking about, that process has to be unplugged. Now, it's frustrating for me as a board member to have to sit here and hear my colleagues be drained because of something that we cannot really control. And so we have to ask leaders above us to stop the playing around about the need to build schools for our children. Because when it gets down to us, it gets very frustrating. You got to choose High Point versus Northwestern. You got to choose Flowers versus Central. That's very frustrating. And let's unclog it and pass and fund the Build to Learn law, build schools for our children. It's connected to the blueprint. And that's the integrated consensus that we need to be able to operate in. I think it passed. Is that right? The motion passed. Is that right? So Ms. King, we'll get that out and we'll draft that, colleagues, get it back out to you all so you know what we're writing.
Good morning. I want to welcome you to the Prince George's County Council. Today is Thursday, May 14th, 2020. We are sitting again today as the Committee of the Whole to do our virtual meeting on budget work sessions. Today we will be continuing with our review of the capital improvement program with two agencies, the Board of Education and the Prince George's Community College, as well as doing any additional budget wrap up. With that, let me turn it back over to Mr. Matlock for his presentation. Good morning.
We requested $18 million in design funding for some of our new schools and redevelopment of some of the other schools. The recommendation from OMB is $7 million. I'll make a note here. This is some important differences. The High Point High School, which was an $8 million budget, was completely defunded. As well, the other issue is a High Point. While we're not going to, we know that maybe all $8 million may not be available now. High Point is a severely overcrowded school, and we would at least like to start planning for the renovation of that school because we want to do that as soon as possible. But we can discuss that later. This is shows our priority projects with the state. They're listed in priority. As most of you know, William Word, New Glen Ridge, and Cherokee Lane are supposed to start construction this year. We're hoping to get them started this May, but it looks like we're going to, because of COVID and a lot of other reasons, it's going to slide a little bit, but they will get started this summer. Changed. Again, High Point will receive no funding. New Northern Area High School received some planning funding, but a little less than we requested.
To Councilmember Taveras. And if my other colleagues have questions, just let me know, please.
So how soon, I'm not gonna lie, I am concerned that High Point is off the list. I'm concerned that Cool Spring didn't get any money, International School didn't get any money, but how soon can we try to bring High Point back into the fold?
I think that's the only big question.
Okay, I guess that's no answer. Thank you so much. And we could all pray for High Point to try to bring them back into the fold. So, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Taveras. Let me turn next. I had Mr. Denoga, and then I think I have Mr. Davis after Ms. Claros, and then Mr. Davis. Excuse me.
Ms. Taveras, I think we can do more than pray on High Point. We actually get votes. That's something that we have an option on.
Mr. Denoga, I hear what you're saying. In general, we are not making choices as to which projects, other than working with the school system. The school system has a large list, and we basically have indicated this is how much money we have, and we've tended to go along with the school system's choices. There have been a few exceptions to that. Granted, the amount of money available is not enough to cover all of the things that they feel they need. But if you look at over the last few years, you'll see that the amount of money from the county has increased pretty dramatically. The amount of money from the state has remained the same. And in addition, we are funding the P3 program coming forward. So we are covering all of the. We are not saying that this project is more important than that. What we are saying is this is the amount of resources we have. We've tried to increase those resources the best as possible, and that's the situation.
Laurel High School, the football stadium issue, I know the governor has not funded that, and so it's been in your budget, it's not been funded. So I doubt it's going to get funded going forward. That's been a huge issue at Laurel High School. So the question I have is, I'm not sure who this goes to. It's partly to school system, but maybe Mr. Early can weigh in. Could we use park and planning funds for recreational use on a school property? Kind of a park school kind of thing, because you're going to be sitting there without that money for probably quite a while. So what kind of option would there be for that?
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of Maryland Park National.
Well, I can't speak for them, but would you be open to a partnership with them? Have you done that before?
Of course, we are always open to partnerships, but as long as it's not going to require more money from us, for sure, because we have the set amount allotted. The agreement was that we would be able to use the $9 million from PAYGO that the state was going to release to us to help with not just law, but there are multiple fields in a 3-year phase-in process. And as you are aware, those funds were never released.
Understood. So the question is, do we keep waiting for something with the current budget situation is probably not going to happen anytime soon, or do we look at other options? And park and planning does have recreation fund balance that could be utilized.
My recommendation is that we look for another option, but I want to say that they were already part of the 3-pronged piece of it.
Okay.
It was us, park and planning, and we were getting another source fund from the from our state, from our senators. Yeah. So they were already part of the 3. So I think what you're asking now is for them to do 2/3 versus the 1/3 that they were being asked to do before, and that I cannot respond to.
I hear you. I did not know they were doing a third.
Let me address Laurel High School specifically. There's a grant that we applied that was being given to the county, I believe, for that high school. That paper's been processed. I believe it's being processed by the county now, and they're waiting on some documentation. Am I not right about that, Rashane?
That is correct. We're waiting to hear back from the state. They had to change some documents.
Right, and in the process of goodwill, we have used some of our planning money to try and get the planning started on Laurel High School. So we're not just sitting holding our hands on it. We shifted a little planning money that we had to start going out to seeking design work on it, and then we're waiting for the rest of the grant money to come through from the state. So I think there is some funding for Laurel High School stadium.
If you would keep me posted on that. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on is this question in the High Point High School situation. When you look at the funding that's being put forth, Northern High School is being advanced with $7 million of planning money, but in the IAC priority list that the county put forward and the IAC approved, it's 6 versus 7 in the priority list, and the Board of Education has issued a resolution a year and a half ago prioritizing High Point High School. So I'm wondering, how is this ending up with High Point being totally defunded? I don't know whether that's a school system choice or a county administration choice, but somebody made a choice.
Yeah, that wasn't our choice.
I think here's the question. We actually had the two schools, I guess, and actually a third school, presented all as the same level of priority. And our view was we were essentially indifferent, whichever the school system felt should move forward. Not that they aren't all needed, and the view was one would precede the other, not that neither would happen, that either one of them would not happen. So the question is which one goes first. And in regard to, with a lack of guidance, we put the northern one first because that had more capacity. But if the school system prefers the High Point one first, we're okay with that too. Whichever one the school system prefers, but without guidance, we put one in front of the other.
Perhaps what might be helpful is a few pages just so that we can keep as a council front and center the various different schools and why these are the ones that are prioritized. You know, there was this back and forth that Mr. Dernoga had about, do we move Northern Area High School before High Point? And I think all of us want both of those to move together because there's implications of both of them in terms of actually, in terms of enrollment and in terms of capacity. You can't actually bring on a brand new High Point High School without a new Northern Area unless you're going to build it even larger. Like there are dynamics in play. The same thing on this Margaret Brent one that got pushed back. There's sort of dynamics in play, but that's the case with so many of our schools. It really is this domino effect that if we don't move certain ones forward, it holds up a whole bunch of educational objectives. And so I think that needs to be a little bit more front and center for us as we think through this.
I just have to say one thing, and I don't say much on these things, but Councilmember Galero's made a good point, and I want to agree to disagree with what Stanley says. I don't think the school system, when you talk about the two high schools, should be in a position of prioritizing those schools. I think both schools are important. So I just want to be clear, I was not in a position representing Dr. Golson and the board to prioritize those schools. I think the issue is they're both important. So at the end of the day, it came down to where we want to fund and where we want to put our money. That's an issue that OMB has to decide about. But I just want to be clear, based on what Councilman Galero says, we shouldn't be in the process of prioritizing both of those schools because both of those schools are important with what we're dealing with up north. So that's just, I just want to put that on record.
Appreciate that. Let me just circle back around. I think Councilmember Taveras had one follow-up question before I close out.
Not necessarily a question, just a comment, and I just wanted to put it out there as Councilwoman Glaros mentioned that there are implications by the choice. If there is only one school to move forward, given our limited funding, we need to account for what the needs are on the ground, and there are implications. I just wanted to remind our colleagues that we have a gap of about 2,500 students that need to be placed within the next couple of years that right now are being placed in surrounding high schools. So there is a need urgently to put these children somewhere. So I just think that, and based on the overflow that we're seeing at the elementary school level, this is just going to continue to grow. I don't know if any of you have any immediate data that you can speak to with regards to the overflow, but these children do need to be placed. There is a need, an urgent need for the existence of a building where we could put the children. And if we can talk about, while we know the politics of wanting a new building, we also need to know that we have a responsibility to children on the ground that have no place to go at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taveras. Any comment, Ms. Golson or Mr. Matlock? Dr. Golson, excuse me.
Yeah, we can provide the projections via email to you all for all of us.
Thank you. Just one follow-up question on the boundary change. What's the potential timing on that? I know you're going before the board and having that conversation. There was some conversation in the past year, and I know that was delayed a little bit to do more comprehensive. So just curious on the schedule.
It goes before the board today for consideration and approval. We did make sure that the company selected has included components that will allow virtual participation from community and not doing the non-traditional of coming out. So that is why it was just delayed a little bit of getting before the board. But we plan to begin that process this summer and all through next school year.